of our guests up here at the head table. We have Mayor Frank Mercado and his wife Frances Mercado. We have Coach Hugh Freeze. I'm sure many of you know him, the head football coach. Pastor Buddy Gray with Hunter Street Baptist Church. Father John Chalmers with Prince of Peace Catholic Church. Christine Hoffman, the Hoover Beautification Board Chairwoman. We also have some elected officials with us. We have Mike Breda with Tommy Tuberville's office. We have Ethan Weiss with Gary Palmer's office. We have Representative Susan DeVos with us. We have Representative Mike Shaw with us. We have former Representative Paul DeMarco. We also have some of our Hoover City Council members with us. We have Steve McClinton. We have Casey Middlebrook. We have Christy Driver. And Sam Sweeney. We also have District Attorney Danny Carr with us today. We want to give our heartfelt appreciation to the Hoover Beautification Board, led by Chairman Christine Hoffman. We appreciate the planning of the board for making this event possible. Thank you so much. At this time, I would like to introduce Mayor Frank Mercado and his long-serving service with the city of Hoover, beginning with the fire department in 1973. He was actually the first paramedic for the city of Hoover. He retired in 2015 as Chief of Operations and Fire Marshal after 42 years of service. He was sworn in as the 10th Mayor of Hoover on November 7, 2016. He recognizes the importance of a strong public safety system, an exceptional school system, and the need for planning the city of Hoover's growth. Mayor Mercado embraces the diversity of Hoover and believes we are a stronger community functioning as one. He and his wife Frances have been married since 1971, and they have 3 children and 9 grandchildren. Let's give a big round of applause for Mayor Mercado.
Well, good morning. Thank you. What a great crowd. I'm so proud to see everyone out here today, this morning. And before I start, we have a lot of events here, and staff here does just a wonderful job, so I've asked them to come out. I'd like to thank Chef Bobby Beard, who put this great meal together for us. We've got Ryan and Craig, and banquet manager Cynthia, banquet captains Eddie, Megan, Tanisha. They're all serving us today, and we thank you so much for being here. Need to recognize some have already been recognized. Of course, my wife Frances, who is with by my side, and just everything we got. It's tough, it's kind of crazy, doesn't it? But you know, it takes a team, and she's right there with me, and I'm grateful for her. Of course, my brothers and my sisters are here. My son and daughter, my son-in-law, my niece. Thank you, because we all kind of walk through this together. But I appreciate them and all that they do. I certainly thank everyone here at the head table for everything. Claire is, of course, a Hoover resident. Love having her emceeing for us today. And, you know, we've got a wonderful school system here, and I did want to pass up the opportunity to recognize our new superintendent, Dr. Kevin Maddox. Maddox, where are you? He's wonderful job. They transformed this into a really magical place this morning. I'm grateful to her and her leadership. I ask all of our Hoover Beautification members if they would stand. And Joshua Hitchcock, thank you for your pledge this morning. Did you go back to school or are you still here? Okay, good. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. And, YMCA does we're partnered with them in a lot of ways, particularly at our school. We have a new director, Kristen Harris. Kristen, can you stand up there? We want to meet you, our new YMCA director. Kristen, I look forward to the upcoming 5K that will be supporting the YMCA and neighborhood bridges. And thank you for being in our community. Coach, certainly we're so happy to have you here as well. I'm grateful that you chose to speak. And if you might, I think you had an opportunity to meet two special ladies that are up here as well. Jean Sullivan, who is the widow of Auburn quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner, Pat Sullivan. And we're also honored to have Gloria Owens, the widow of James Owens, who was the first African-American man to sign at Auburn University. So, Jean, I just want to thank you and Pat for the work that y'all give with the head and neck cancer patients at UAB. And, of course, Terry Beasley and his wife, Mrs. Beasley, they have been very active, and as Jean has as well, with chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And so, as you know, it's a brain injury that many of these athletes that suffer with. It's not discovered until often later in life. And then we are so grateful to have Gloria Owens. Gloria, good morning to you. And she is the wife of James Owens, who, of course, was, again, as I said, the first African-American player at Auburn. And I know that the young men that receive the James Owens Courage Award each year appreciate that incredible honor. So thank each of y'all for being here today. I know that he doesn't want to be recognized, but you'll have to discuss that. Tom Lehman's here. He's blended in and you'll never spot him. He is playing in the Regents Golf Tournament this week, and we were honored to have him here in 2019 speaking at our prayer breakfast. And he did a wonderful job, and we are grateful that I think I see him back there. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And with that, it's very comforting to come together as a community this morning and pray together. I hope that we all will continue to pray for our community each and every day. We include a small prayer card in each of the place settings. And these cards are meant to provide a way for you to pray for our city. My challenge to you is to take these cards and begin praying for the people and the groups that are listed there. Prayer is so very, very powerful. Thank you ahead of time for committing to pray for our city. So now it's time to hear from our guest speaker. Hugh Freeze was named the 31st head football coach in Auburn in the 129-year history. He joined us November 28th, 2022. He's an experienced head coach at the collegiate level. For 12 years, Coach Freeze has elevated each program that he has been head of, and that's Ole Miss, and most recently at Liberty. Coach Freeze has nearly 3 decades of continued coaching success, including head coaching experience. And he told me that really the only way he wants to be introduced is to be introduced as a person that is a sinner saved by grace. So I give you, Coach, Hugh Freeze.
I'm not real big on introductions. That is my favorite one. Is just stand publicly all the time and declare that in the arenas all the time, but I stand ready to give reason for the hope that is within me, and I'm thankful that you have a mayor that believes in that, and there's still places in our great nation that stand firm with that. And I too, Gene, Lori, y'all are heroes to us at Auburn, and it's always a pleasure to be with both of you. So you said it right about Tom Lehman. He's the most humble servant that you would ever come across. And I had the pleasure of getting to know him some years back, and he's been one of the greatest encouragers to me through the ups and downs of our profession. And, he took me to play golf one time out in Arizona, and if you know Tom Lehman, through all the President's Cups, Ryder Cups, Major Champion, everything that he's done in the game, he's most known for his integrity and his service to others. But he tees off, and one of the things he's really known for is one of the straightest drivers of the golf ball. I mean, he knew like every time exactly what he was going to do. That thing was going to curve from the right to the left about, 5 yards if he wanted it to, and he could control that. We're on a Saturday morning, club is buzzing, and I'm nervous. This is Tom Lehman. He gets his right down the middle, of course, and then I finally get to over my ball, and I get over the ball at his prestigious club out in Arizona, and a voice over the loudspeaker from the clubhouse says, "Will the gentleman on the ladies' tee please back up to the men's tee?" I had to compose myself, and I've coached in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and I probably have never, my hands are sweating now, but I get back over it and said, I've got to focus in, and I don't want to slow Tom down, and I get over my ball again, and the loudspeaker comes on again, "Will the gentleman on the ladies' tee please back up to the men's tee?" And I was frustrated at that point, and he said it one more time, "Will the gentleman on the ladies' tee please back up to the men's tee?" And I threw my club down. I said, "Will the idiot on the microphone please shut up and let me hit my second shot?" I don't know why Tom still likes me or comes around me, but he probably won't play golf with me anymore. But I'm honored to have so many good friends like him that love God and love people. And so I'm gonna talk fast, and you listen fast. And I think I have something that I know speaks to me. Hopefully, it speaks to you also. If there's one thing I know about life, is that you will experience uncertainty. You will experience times where I'm just not quite certain what the next step should be. I'm just not quite certain what the outcome is going to be. I'm really very, very unclear on even what my next step should be and how to navigate that. And when I'm talking about uncertainty, I'm referring to a season and situations in life where you really don't know what's coming, but you really would like to know. I mean, I would really, really like to know, if I do this, then this, the if-then statements. And sometimes with my future, my family, my jobs, I really wish God would just slip me a note and let me know how this is going to play out. Has anyone ever felt that way? And I mean, if you just slip me this note and let me know how this is going to play out, I think, man, I will walk with confidence, and I'll be really, really brave in walking this journey out in faith. It kind of starts to feel backwards to me a little bit, truthfully, in my mind. You kind of expect uncertainty for non-believers, because they're calling the shots, even though they're really not. God is still sovereign, but they believe that they're calling the shots. And for those of us that are believers, we have signed over to not calling the shots, and we have surrendered ourselves to someone else calling the shots. And we serve a good shepherd who leads us into green pastures and by still waters. And so, man, it starts to feel a little backwards. And to be very candid, I've witnessed believers over the last few years, with everything going on in our nation and in our families and in our world, questioning themselves on, am I in the faith? Because I'm experiencing so much uncertainty. And when I surrender, He will not always ask my permission to lead me to a place that I never saw coming. It shakes you up with anxiety. It can rattle your family. I've experienced that with my personal family. And it brings you to a point where, man, how do I deal with this uncertainty? And I really believe if you, there's certain key points that I want you to take out of today, and this is one of them. We run to control instead of running for clarity. So I'll give you this example of, we all like to control and think we feel like we're in control. And so I just got through, I was coaching on a staff in the SEC as an assistant coach. The head coach gets let go. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I go and find this little bitty tiny job called Lambeth University in Jackson, Tennessee. It no longer exists, but it was two of the more enjoyable years of coaching. We had no money. We had no facilities. It was just a group of young guys that loved to play the game, and we won 23 games in those 2 years there and had a blast. But we get there, and 6 months into it, we find out the school is going under, and we're not getting paid. So we're about 2/3 through with the season, and I start running for control, not clarity. My idea was, I got to go get paid. And there's this offensive coordinator. First job that came open in that cycle was the offensive coordinator's job at UT Chattanooga. In my mind, I'm going to get that. At least I have something in hand. I go up there. They offer me the job. I call Jill. Jill, they offer me the job at UT Chattanooga. We're going to go there. And she said, whoa, 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 whoa. We haven't prayed about that. I remember this conversation vividly, and I said, Jill, there is nothing to pray about. We're not getting paid. She said, well, we always said on these decisions we would take some time and pray about it. And Hugh, need I remind you, you brought like a full staff here with their wives and their kids, and you go be the OC, you can't take everybody with you. And I said, Jill, we're not getting paid. She said, Hugh, promise me we'll take a few days to think this through. I drove back furious at her because I knew she was right. And I said, okay. I was at the time doing a program called the Divine Mentor, and the Divine Mentor was you have no clue what you're going to do that morning in your devotional time until you hit on the button. And so my common practice was, as I drove into work early, I would tell God everything that's on my mind. And so these next few days, I had to give them an answer by Saturday. This was like Wednesday. And so every morning, I'm like, man, I really need a word, God. I really need clarity. I'm seeking clarity now instead of control. And I'm seeking it from you. So will you please give me some clarity on what this next step is? And I will walk in faith and do it. And man, I'm anxious as I get into the office, hit on Divine Mentor Thursday morning. Man, I just don't, you're not giving it to me. It gets to Friday morning. I click on Divine Mentor after having the same discussion in this Philippians 2:4. And it says, do not merely look out for your own interests, but for the interest of others. Dang. So I called Jill and said, we're staying. And called a staff meeting that morning, told them I was staying. And I said, but I highly suggest you start looking for a job. Because this time next year, I'm going to be looking for one. But I started seeking clarity instead of control. 2 months later, to the date, 2 men walk in my office, Dan Crockett and Steve Brooks. And they each write $1 million check to back pay all of our coaches and the covers for the following year. Seeking clarity, not control. The world right now is desperate for a group of people that are armed with love, humility, and grace, and the power of the Holy Spirit to stand and say, this is who Jesus is. This is why I follow him. And this is why you should also. In Acts chapter 27, Paul is one of the greatest examples of this uncertainty that we're talking about for life and maybe finding some clarity in it. In verse 9 through 12, if you know the story of Paul, so he's been in prison all in Acts nearby, and has gone before judge after judge, and finally he appeals to the highest court, and they're going to ship him to Rome, and he's going to get to go and plead his case to the highest of courts, and look, I'm wrongly accused. They just don't want me to share the good news of the gospel, and I've done nothing wrong, and he's getting ready to go on this ship, and in Acts 27:9, it says, much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous, because by now it was after the Day of Atonement, which means it's supposed to be wintertime. Not a good time to sail around Greece on a ship that's probably not very sturdy at that time. Paul warned them, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to the ship and cargo and possibly even our lives. But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable for them to stay in winter, the majority decided it was good to sail on. Now, most scholars, when you study this, believe that the reason they didn't want to stay in that harbor is if they could get to this next harbor called Phoenix, there was more to do and stay in winter. That's really how we work. And if we can get to that resort and stay in winter there, it'd be a lot better than staying at this one. There's nothing to do there. And so winter's coming. They're not happy. And Paul said, no, we really shouldn't do this. You should listen to me. And obviously they didn't. And then the gentle south wind begins to blow. How many of us have had a gentle south wind and we said, oh, yeah, I'm going to jump on that ship and go there? I'll tell you another story in a minute where I did that. So they saw the gentle south wind and they said, hey, let's go. It's our time to go. And before very long, a hurricane force just started causing havoc on them. It was such a violent battering that the storm, the next day they began to throw all the cargo overboard. On the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands, with neither sun nor stars, remember that, with neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and the storm continued raging, and we finally gave up all hope of being saved. So a gentle south wind comes. Fast forward past the second year at Lambeth. They were still struggling. Obviously, we've been blessed, but I'm in the mode of I still got to control a little bit. So, offensive coordinator job comes now to FBS level in San Jose, California. I jump on that south wind, or eastern wind, I guess, or western wind, I guess it would be. And man, I immediately began to regret and doubt. January 1st, I get in my Jeep from Jackson, Tennessee, drive to the airport, Memphis, Tennessee. I cried all the way to the airport. Why? Whoa. I took this in my own hands. I get out to San Jose, and man, it's just not the right environment for me, the right fit for me. And I do stay 2 months, and then thanks be to God, Arkansas State calls and offers me the offensive coordinator's job there, and I immediately jumped on that and came back. But sometimes the gentle southern winds that blow us in directions, if we're not careful and we don't see clarity, we can make rash decisions. Man, have you ever been there? I told you to remember a word in there. They were without sun and stars. That was their navigation system then. They had no GPS. They had no clue where they were. I have to admit to you, and I bet you would do the same, that there are times, and maybe it's even you right now, where you look in the mirror and you're like, who is this man? one of my favorite scenes in the movie Creed is Rocky is being begged by Apollo's son, train me, Rock, train me, Rock, train me, Rock. Rocky's, nah, I'm not into training. Begs him, and finally he gives in to his cry, all right, I'll train you. Let's go to the old gym where your father used to train, and he brings Apollo in there. They go by the first ring, and Apollo's like, Rock, let me go. Let me show you what I can do. I'm ready to roll. I can take that guy. Let me get in the ring. And Rocky says nothing, just walks. Go by the second ring. Apollo's like, man, come on, let me in there, Rock. I want to show you what I can do. I want to show you what I can do. And Rocky just keeps walking in motion with me. He takes him all the way in the back. And there's this old mirror standing there with cracks on it. And he makes Apollo stand in front of that. And he says to Apollo, what do you see? No, what do you see, Apollo? I see Apollo Creed. He says, get real familiar with that guy. He's your greatest asset and your greatest enemy. And I would say to you that some of us, if we stand before the mirror at some points in our lives, or even right now, man, we're like, man, how did I get to this point? Man, these guys on the ship, there's no sun, there's no stars, there's no navigation system. We don't know where we are. We're sick. Probably seasick and throwing up everywhere. Man, how did I get here? Why did we follow this? It's never going to change. It said, man, we're at a point where we have no hope. That's an awful place to be in life, with no hope. All hope is lost. Then Paul says, after we have gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, hey, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. So Paul was basically saying, hey guys, you should listen to me. But I think maybe he's probably, I don't know that he's saying that in an egotistical way, as in a way of, hey, really pay attention to what I have to say next. Because you should have listened to me on the front end, but pay attention to what I have to say next, and this is what he says to them. Last night, an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, do not be afraid. You must stand trial before Caesar, and you will. And God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he said. Nevertheless, we will run aground on some island. So Paul's telling those guys, man, 276 of them, I'm going to Rome. It will happen. Your protection is going to come because God has given me the providence that you're with me. Your proximity to me is going to save you. Remember that. God gives enough clarity to take the next step, but not enough certainty to eliminate faith. I want to say that again. God gives enough clarity to take the next step, but not enough certainty to eliminate faith. He did not. Here's the problem and the tension with this whole talk for us believers. If God gives enough clarity to take the next step and not enough certainty to eliminate faith, then how do I get clarity to take the next step? Paul had angels show up and tell him, but they didn't give him all the information. Paul got it, but man, they just, hey, we're going to run on some island. Where? I don't know. I have no clue. We're going to go to Rome. When we're going to get there, I have no idea. I don't know. The ship's going to get destroyed, but everybody's going to be okay. But it's going to actually get worse before it gets better. If you read the whole story, it's really bad. But he had not all the information, but he had enough clarity. Paul had a commitment to his life to being in close proximity to God, so that when God had something to tell him about his next step, Paul hears it. So here's the tension. If you don't hear anything I say today, please hear this, because I'm a living testimony of this truth. The reason why you and I don't have clarity when we face this next step with uncertainty is because of the noise in my life is drowning out the presence of God. We can't sit still. We have to be stimulated. We have to, man, if I do sit still, then I got to scroll. Or I got to worry about the number of texts I missed, And this is an ongoing battle for me, but it's one that I'm committed to winning, is, man, finding time to get still and being in the presence of God. Because the fight for our inner peace is the fight for my awareness of God's presence. Paul got that. Paul listened. And because of his proximity to others, others were blessed. There's a direct correlation to the pace at which I live my life and the turmoil and chaos that comes with it. A direct correlation. We scroll, we swipe, we look, we are nonstop stimulated. Man, the scripture and prayer is just a small part that we do. I just never slow down to be close to Him. That's when clarity really comes for me. And if I look back in my life, I see that when I slow down, He spoke to me. He showed me the next step. He didn't show me the end, but He showed me the next step. Man, He is around. It's not God talk louder, it's Hugh, get quieter. And I think you would find the same. Everyone who knows me knows there's a huge difference. John Miller's here, who's been with me for years, and he will tell you, everyone who knows me knows there's a huge difference in the Hugh that walks in his flesh and the Hugh that walks in the overflow of being with God. I can be reactive. I'm unclear. I'm uncertain. I'm not decisive. As opposed to walking with Him, and then there's freedom, there's peace, and there's clarity, and there's confidence. And if you bumped into Pastor this morning with his coffee cup, he would have spilled coffee on you. Why would he spill coffee on you? Come on. Treat you like no players. Why would he spill coffee on you? Because that's what's in his. And whatever's in your cup is coming out. And if we don't slow down to be present in the awareness of our Heavenly Father, the things that come out of our cup are usually like, man, who is this guy? So what's in your cup? It's our own fault, so we must own it. I'm going to close with three things. I know I got to go. 3 anchors to catch you when you start to drift in this uncertainty. 3 anchors that I believe Paul gives us back in verse 23. An anchor is something that holds, man, it holds you, and you can drift a little bit, but you get too far. The anchor says, no, come on back. Come back. So here are your 3 anchors from this story, man, that I think we all have to admit that at some point we'll drift. It's a natural thing that we can all drift. So here's 3 anchors. Number 1, the anchor of belonging to God. Paul says in verse 23 when he says, hey guys, we're going to be all right. You're going to live. Last night, the angel of God, to whom I belong. So the anchor of belonging to God, if you're in the faith, the God to whom I belong, I know Him as my Father. My allegiance is to Him. But here's the rub, here's the battle. And if you would be honest with yourself, like I'm being honest with mine, the most subconscious lie in this room this morning, the most subconscious lie in this room about belonging to God is we don't believe we belong there. Because usually it's the enemy that says, whoa, man, you're not ready for that. And if you do that, then man, you've got to make this change and this change and this change, and all of a sudden we're overwhelmed with this fear of being in the presence of a holy God and knowing I don't belong there. And so we say, well, okay, I'll put that off till tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes next week, and then next week is next month, and then it's years down the road when we forget about the cross. I will never measure up. But thanks be to Jesus that He did on my behalf. And now I am a son of the Most High. Accepted, forgiven, loved, and I can approach Him like that. And that's what Paul was saying. An anchor for me is, man, every time I start to drift, I got to remember I belong to God. I am a son of the King. Second anchor is the anchor of service to God. Paul says, the God to whom I serve. I believe chaos thrives when His people are not committed to some type of service for Him. I don't know what your time frame is, and I promise you mine's as crazy as anybody. But Jill and I believe with all our heart that there should be part of our life that is dedicated to the service of God. And it brings some peace to us. whether it's serving on boards of orphan care, foster care systems, which I'm trying to get a special thing done in Alabama that you can pray for me with that, and for others. But man, Paul's service on this ship to him, his service to God was protection to others around him. Service to me is trouble. Service to God brings peace. If you think of the two shipwrecks in the two of the shipwrecks in the Bible, Jonah versus Paul, two totally different things. Jonah starts to have a total storm, and the people are like, man, what is the problem? And Jonah says, I'm the problem. Y'all can throw me off because I'm the reason all this is happening. Paul, on the other hand, they 276 are protected. Storm was awful, but Paul's proximity protected them. It's not about you, it's not about me, it's about his glory. So I would encourage you, I don't care what age you are, I don't care how old, how young, there's a place of service for all of us that we can do. And it may seem small to you, it's not small to the ones you're serving. So you want another anchor to help you with uncertainty in the next step? Service to God. Find something to plug into. So the anchor of belonging to God, the anchor of service to God, and the anchor of faith in God. Last thing he told them, they have hope. It will happen just as he told me. That doesn't mean it's always pretty. If you go read verses 39 through 44, it was bad, and they finally ran up on some shore somewhere. It may not work out the way you wanted to, but you do trust in his character after time. Jill and I started back when I was a high school coach with a fishbowl of putting rocks in a fishbowl of every time God was faithful to something to us. Right on it with Sharpie. And over time, when remembrance is a great thing, when you start to drift. Whoa. Let me go back. Let me pull a few of these rocks out. Man, God was faithful then. How in the world did we get through that, Jill? God's faithfulness. God's faithfulness. God's faithfulness. So I don't know if it's a journal for you. I don't know if it's some rocks. I don't know what it is, but you better find something that reminds you that you serve a God. If you're a believer in Christ, you serve a God that is faithful. That doesn't mean it will always be pretty. That doesn't mean it won't be hard. Who do you trust most in life? I would venture to guess, whoever that is on your mind right now, for me it would be my wife. Why? Because I have witnessed her character and her personal equity in my life for 31 years. And I think you'll find the same about God's character and his faithfulness to you if you had any time with him. And maybe you're not in the faith, and maybe this is something that's totally new to you, and maybe today's the day that you say, man, that's interesting to me. And chances are there's somebody here that's like, man, Coach, this ain't making me feel real good because I don't like what I see in the mirror right now. Roy Reed was one of my favorite stories. Played center for Cal Bears, 1929 Rose Bowl against Georgia Tech. It's a rainy day. He's team captain. Snaps the ball on a given play, and man, then in the center's dream, the ball is on the ground, and I get it. And man, Roy starts running with the ball. I'm sure he's thinking as he's running, because he ends up running 69 yards as a center. I am sure he's thinking, Terry, I'm sure he's thinking, man, I should have been the running back. I mean, nobody's called me, and I should have been the running back. They should give me the ball more. 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards. Finally, he is run down and tackled by his own teammate. He was running the wrong way. True story. Go read about it on wherever you want to read it. He's tackled at the 2-yard line. It's right before half, late in the second quarter. The Coach Nibs of Cows decides not to even run a play because it was a messy, messy day, and we're just going to punt the ball and try to get to halftime. It was 0-0 at the time. The punt gets blocked out of the back of the end zone. That's a safety. We go into halftime down 2-0 because Roy ran the wrong way. Roy's a team captain. The story is documented very well by interviewing people, and he is in halftime with a towel over his head saying, I've let my university down, I've let you down, Coach Nibs, I've let myself down, I've let my family down. I cannot go back out there and play the second half. I just can't do it. I'm just totally embarrassed. I've failed miserably. Anybody ever been there? I've been there. Coach Nibs says, Roy, the team captain, you got to go finish, man. The stories in the interview say that Roy goes back out, has a great second half, dominates. And you know what I would love to tell you, Mayor? I would love to tell you that, man, Roy made the key block on the 4th and 1 that punched it in for the win. Wouldn't that be a great story? I mean, we could make a great movie about that. That's not what happened. His Cal Bears lost 8-7 for the national championship. And he gave up 2 points right before half that were critical in it. I had the privilege of leading the team to a New Year's Six game at a previous school. It was in Atlanta at the Peach Bowl. They had this fancy new College Football Hall of Fame there. Miller says, Hugh, you got to go to this event there. And I'm like, Miller, I don't want to go. I want to stay here and watch film. We need to get ready for this game. I don't want to go to another event. They've invited me out. I do not want to go to another one. Coach, you got to go. How long do I have to stay? Well, I don't want to stay long. I just want to go. I want to come back and watch film. I want to get ready for the game. We go to this College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. If you're ever there, you should take your time and tour it. It's really nice. So I slide off so I can be away from the people, and I kind of want to walk around, and I'm looking at all the Archie Manning and one of my heroes, and I look and whoa, guess whose name I see in the College Football Hall of Fame? Roy Regal, 2-time All-American, Cal Bears, 1928 and 29. What I'm saying to you is how you finish matters. You don't have to walk out of here today and beat yourself up like Roy at halftime because you don't like what you've seen or what it's been to this point or the uncertainty, or you serve a God that's ready to give you clarity, to give you peace, to give you purpose. Don't know if it'll be easy, but I do know, like Roy did, you can finish well. Stats tell us that 0 to 19 is the first quarter of our life, and 20 to 37 is the second quarter of our life, and 38 to 56 is the third quarter of our life, and 57 to 75 is the fourth quarter of our life, and thank God for overtime. I have no idea what quarter you're in, but I came to tell you today that you're still in the game. You still have breath in your lungs. You still have the ability to serve. And you still have a God that's waiting on you to say, come home. Let me give you clarity. Amid all the uncertainty, I'll show you the next step. And that's my message to you today. God bless you. Have a great day.